Let's see if I remember how to do this. Hello, I'm Jordan and you're not. And it's been 455 days since my last video, but who's counting? So, before I start my review, I just want to say rest in peace to Denise Nickerson, who played Amy Jennings in the Dark Shadows series and who played Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So, I've talked about Dark Shadows many times in the past. So, but, just when I get out, the Dark Shadows just pulls me back in. Can't get away from it. It's actually been 4 years since my last Dark Shadows video. I reviewed Angelique's Descent, which was written by Laura Parker. So today our review is Master of Dark Shadows. So this is a documentary about not only the series Dark Shadows, but the creator of it, Dan Curtis. So before we get to that, let's talk about how I got into Dark Shadows. Now, this is for the new people that have never seen any of my videos before. So if you have watched my videos before, you know all this crap anyway. Okay, so where I come into Dark Shadows, it all started when I saw Tim Burton's masterpiece, Dark Shadows, and that came out in 2012, which every Dark Shadows fan in the world loves. So I saw this twice in the theater, and I thought it was a very good movie. I mean, at the time I had not seen any of. I'd seen maybe one episode of the series, and I thought it was a good little fish out of water story about a vampire coming into 1970s culture and just kind of being bamboozled about different things. But as I saw, as I got into the series, I can see why a lot of people didn't like it. So after seeing the movie, I thought, I want to check out this series, because that's what I do. After I watch a movie based on a TV series that maybe I haven't seen, I like to go back and watch the series, like with The Land of the Lost, that starred Will Ferrell. I bought the complete series of that, that was from Sid and Marty Krofft. I did that before. I did that with Dukes of Hazzard and the A-Team movie. And so I knew this was going to be a very expensive journey. So I started out buying the collections individually. Dark Shadows, the Beginning Collection 1, Dark Shadows, the Beginning Collection 2, and, then they go into Dark Shadows Collection 1. That's another thing. Why do they start out at the beginning? Why does it have to be Dark Shadows Collection 1? That's when, Barnabas comes in. Look like Collection 1 would be the very beginning. Like, why do people just skip the very beginning episodes? I thought they were very good episodes, by the way. Okay. So it was about June 2012, that's when I started watching the series. And it wasn't until November of 2012 that I bought the coffin set. That big, huge, enormous coffin set that has every single episode. And it cost $350. $350. I had to do things for that coffin set that'll make your skin crawl. I don't want to talk about it. So I started in June of 2012, and it took me till July 2013 to finish the whole entire series. And I did a 5-part review of it, but at the time I didn't have this camera. If you haven't noticed, this is a brand new, well, it's not new, but it's newer than what I had. So with this one, I can talk a lot more if I wanted to. The last camera, I could only talk for about 14 minutes at a time, then I had to stop and upload it, delete it, then start over again. With this one, I can talk for upwards to at least 50 minutes, if I want to. But who the crap wants to hear me talk for 50 minutes? I know I wouldn't. So why are you watching me anyway? Okay, so I finished that, then now it leads to now. So we get to Master of Dark. Okay, Master of Dark Shadow. It's actually a very great documentary. So I've actually never reviewed a documentary before, because documentaries are about talking, or reviews themselves pretty much, reviewing of shows. So I'm reviewing a review of a show. Yeah. It's actually a very, very well thought out documentary, and more details about how the show was made, and like how Dan Curtis, he was from what the sounds of it, it sounds like he was kind of a hard ass. Like everything had to be done his way or the highway. And then before Dark Shadows, he had a golf show. Can you believe that? Because apparently he was really into golf. I would not watch that. I do not care for golf whatsoever, unless it's Happy Gilmore or that scene in Space Jam where Michael Jordan plays golf. Okay. So we get all these great little scenes and clips from like the 1950s and the 1960s, which I love, by the way. I love seeing how life in the 50s used to be, and just the classic cars, and just there was even a commercial in there that was so offensive. It was like, this is Mrs. Cliche, and she cleans the kitchen all day, and she's happy. And that's just offensive to today's time. How dare they? Triggered. So we start off, they have clips of Dan Curtis talking about how he came up with Dark Shadows. He said he had a dream that there was a lady just on a train, just kind of going into this, train station, just dark and dreary, and car getting off and water crashing against the waves. That's the very first episode of Dark Shadows. I think they were going to call it Shadows on the Wall, but I'm glad they changed it to Dark Shadows. It just sounds cooler and hip and gangsta. And let's see. Of course, they have interviews with the cast that are still alive. You got you got Catherine Lee Scott. You have Nancy, who played Maggie Evans / Josette Dupree. You got Nancy, is it Barrett? Oh, I'm saying that right. Who played Carolyn Stoddard. You have Jerry Lacey, who played Reverend Trask. You have John Carlin, who played Willie Loomis. You have, did I say David Selby, who played Quentin Collins? Am I saying that right? You have Roger Davis, who played Peter Bradford / Jeff Clark, who makes your ears bleed, by the way. And yeah, there's just a bunch of awesome little tidbits about the series, and how for about 13 for 13 weeks, and then the show wasn't doing too well at all. Like originally Dan Curtis didn't want it to be some little goth. He didn't want it to be a soap opera, and it turned out to be this little gothic romance daytime show for women in the kitchen. I'm sorry, that sounded offensive, by the way. I mean, that's how it was back in the 60s. I'm just going by that time. So for a while, it wasn't doing too well because people just weren't watching it. So they figured, we're going to get canceled. Let's put some more supernatural elements in there, like a ghost. And then that's when they brought in the character of Laura Collins, who was actually a phoenix, who comes back alive every year, or 100 years, to be reborn through the ashes, and she wants to take David with her. And then, right after that, that's when you get the real deal. That's when you get Barnabas Collins, who made Dark Shadows great again. I'm going to get a lot of hate now, sorry. So yeah, that's when Jonathan Frid came in, who played the vampire Barnabas Collins. So since they figured, we're going to get canceled anyway, let's just put some supernaturalness in there like a vampire. And that's when the ratings just went through the roof. They went, phew. So yeah, Jonathan Frid got a lot and lots and lots of fan letters. And they talk about it and how women sent nude pictures of themselves to him. And they had one of the actors, I think James Storm, who played Gerard Stiles, who he had a stalker for a little bit. And about how they had this bunch of people outside the studio waiting to see them and get autographs and pictures with them. And they show the magazines that about the reviews of, and they had the games they did, the Dark Shadows board game, and they talk about Jonathan Frid making an appearances on daytime talk show, or just talk shows in general, and being on a game show. It was I think with the Generation Gap or something. and how the series eventually got canceled in 1971 because they felt like they just run their course. Now, they probably could have done a little bit more, but yeah, it was kind of running its course. Like, in parallel, 1841, it was just kind of getting blah. Excuse me. So then they kind of go on to talk about Dan Curtis's other projects, which, I mean, he, of course, people just thought of him as the Dark Shadows guy, and he kind of wanted to get away from that and do just, different things. But then eventually in the 1990s, 1991, he remade Dark Shadows for about 12 episodes. Then the darn Gulf War had to happen. And then they talk about the movie, Tim Burton's movie, for a little bit. And I suppose that's kind of wrapping up here. And I would give this documentary and this whole thing an A plus. Now, let's get to some of the special features, which I'm going to talk about two things on the special features. There's a few things on here, but they show Catherine Lee Scott there at the studio, going back 50 years later, showing what it looks like nowadays, and then they show Barnabas Collins at the White House. Now this is very interesting because it's Halloween 1969, and Richard Nixon's president, and Richard is president, and he has Jonathan Frid is there playing Barnabas Collins, and they're having like a Halloween party or a parade or something, and he's just there portraying Barnabas Collins, and there's kids going up to him, and he's kind of taking pictures with them, having fun. And another thing, there's a episode of a series from the 1950s called The Web. Now, this episode was written by one of the writers of Dark Shadows, and there you can see a lot of similarities between the two, which I will explain. And see, the episode is called The House. See that now, this episode is about it's two women. It's a daughter and her mom. Now, the mom stays in this house for 25 years because she thinks she killed her husband and she can't leave. And then some guy comes back into town and's like, I know what you did. Do what I say or I'll reveal your secret. So he blackmails her. Which is exactly what happens in Dark Shadows, the earlier episodes with Elizabeth Stoddard and Jason McGuire. I hated Jason McGuire. So he does the exact same thing. He's, because Liz thinks she killed her husband, Paul Stoddard, 18 years ago. And so she never leaves the house. So then Jason comes in and he blackmails her. He's like, if you don't marry me, I'll tell your secret. Yeah. And that's when Carolyn kind of goes all rebellious and dates some biker named Buzz. Yeah. Okay. Hope you give this documentary a try. If you're a huge Dark Shadows fan like me, definitely check it out.